Hello and welcome to Recap the podcast with me, Lucy Wheeler. Recap stands for Research in Education, Child Development and Parenting, and our mission is to embrace everyone and make everyone feel at home and part of a supportive community. Here on the podcast, you will find stories from parents, child development professionals, researchers, early childhood educators, and many, many more. So pop on those headphones while you walk the dog, grab a snippet during your lunch break or while your baby sleeps, and enjoy listening to some incredible stories from some truly amazing people. Welcome to Recap. Hello and a huge warm welcome today to my guest Simon Preston, who I'm very excited to chat to today about all things neurodiversity and parental grief. So before we head into that, I just want to tell you a little more about our guest. As a dedicated and experienced neurodivergent educational leader, Simon is deeply committed to neurodiversity inclusion and enhancing the educational experiences of all students and educators. With over 2 decades of experience in teaching, educational leadership and management, Simon has honed his skills and knowledge in this field by graduating with a distinction with an MBA in Educational Leadership and Management and is currently pursuing a Doctor of Education. Simon's research explores how educational leadership, management and administration impact neurodivergent teachers compared to their neurotypical peers. So shedding a light on this topic, as well as founding Neurodiversity in Education CIC, Simon aims to drive positive change in educational settings and advocate for the needs for all neurodivergent individuals. It is worth saying from the start that this episode may include some sensitive topic discussions around child loss and grief and therefore holds a trigger warning. So it is my absolute pleasure to welcome to the episode today, Simon Preston. Simon, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks for inviting me.
You are very welcome. I've been looking forward to speaking to you. So thank you for coming on and agreeing to share your story and your expertise on some very difficult and challenging topics. We do really appreciate it. Can you start by telling us a little bit about your journey into parenthood? What was it like becoming a dad for the first time?
I was absolutely incredible, and terrifying at the same time. And
Yeah.
you suddenly realise the weight of responsibility when you become a parent and just when you become a
Yeah.
dad, and it's something you can definitely not necessarily prepare for, but you find a way, don't you? And
Yeah.
you make it work. But what I think the real big surprise is the sort of how deep the love is for the child when the child's
Mm.
here, and it's a wonderful feeling. And I moved to when my wife was pregnant, so we moved to Birmingham,
Okay.
and we were trying to set things up for the family and so on. But just say it's what you think it's going to be like and what it actually is like is very different, and you have these sort of ideas about sleepless nights and things like that. But to be honest, it doesn't last very long. It didn't last very
Yeah.
long, and you just power through with good teamwork, and yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah, I think you're completely right when you say that you try and prepare, but there's only so much you can prepare. And it's quite often people say, parenting doesn't have a handbook, and you can have all of the support and advice around you, and you can have all of the people saying, oh, for me, this worked, but that doesn't mean it's going to work for your little one. So with all the will in the world, all of that support is great, but actually the real lived experience can be very different. And like you say, you can't always prepare so much for it, can
No, that's
you?
right. It's all to really know about it. You have to have that lived experience, and but when that lived experience actually happens, when it actually occurs, it's you just find your way, and you find your way of
Mm.
parenting and so on. And but actually, that's one thing, but just having a child in your life makes a real big difference, and it influences you in everything you do. And
Mm.
yeah, I love being a dad.
Quite often people comment and say to me how kind of identity changing becoming a parent is. And it's something that I speak to a lot of people about because, I mean, and it's true for me as well. I had my daughter when I was just turned 20. And she's coming up for 18 now. But when I had her, it's just something inside you changes as a person, I think. And it changed my whole focus in life. It changed my perspective on a lot of things. And it gave me a passion and drive to do all of the things that I do to better my life for her, better her life, better my life, and to kind of role model to her, how to do life kind of thing. So I feel like it does really change you as a person, whether you kind of plan for it that way or
No, I
not.
agree. I mean, it's that whole sort of responsibility aspect because you go through life before having a child that you're the only person you're generally responsible for is yourself, and you've got and
It's true.
when you've got a new life that's come into your life and you've got your own child, then you're not just responsible for yourself and what you do, you're also responsible for the child and making sure that they have a
Mm,
good start in life and I think because of that, that's what makes you sort of reevaluate life more, and what your
yeah.
purpose is and things, and it's also it's very enriching at the same time, and you get
Mm,
you're not on your own on a journey anymore. You're part of a team. There's nothing better than going on a journey when it's a shared journey.
hmm Absolutely. So, how many children do you have? Have you done parenting more than once?
Yes, I'll say I had three children. I've got two now.
Yep. Yep.
There's Bethany who sadly passed away. She was the eldest and our first child. We've got Sophie who's now coming up to being 13, and I've
Oh,
got
teenage years.
yeah, and I've got a little pocket rocket Phoenix who's 3 years old.
Oh, wow. So you're going to be experiencing the teenage years and those toddler years side by side.
Absolutely, absolutely, and then both Sophie and Phoenix are both neurodivergent children, and
Okay.
Phoenix also has complex needs as well. So it's he's
Okay.
pre-verbal at the moment, so we're just helping him with his communication, and he's a happy lad, and he communicates by well, I say throwing things at me, but he bring he brings what he needs, and he takes me to where he wants me to get something for him and things. So he's communicating and
Oh, that's good.
in his own way.
Brilliant. So imagine that your journey into parenthood for those three different occasions, they're three very different children. So your experience, and like we were saying, you can't plan for it. You also can't plan in terms of, oh, well, they're going to be the same as their siblings. I'll just do the same. And I imagine that's not been the case. Well, it isn't the case generally
No, it's
anyway.
definitely not. They are three very different children. It's three very different children. And you know that's what's really lovely about them is their uniqueness. And
Yeah.
there's ups and downs in parenting three very unique children. Um, but there's more ups and downs. And there's times where they really need help with something, and as a parent, got to be there and help as much as possible. But at the same time, finding the things that they like doing and what they're good at, and reminding them that they're good at it, so it sort of keeps them feeling good and positive about themselves.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely not like you said earlier on. There's no handbook for parenting. There's no one size fits all. It is very much um,
Yeah.
adapting to the children, but at the same time sharing your own experience of growing up with them, and so that way they can learn from the mistakes that we've made in the past, kind of thing. And yeah, I think
Mm,
we've got a very good balance
mm.
now. It can be very hard work sometimes, but we've got a good balance. Bethany is sadly not with us anymore, and I'm sure we'll be talking about that again in a minute. But with Sophie now, she's in the specialist provision now. She's actually now really doing well, and Phoenix
Okay.
is his nursery. I couldn't sing any more praises. I tell you, they've been brilliant.
Oh, good.
In fact,
Yeah.
the other children that shares the class with in nursery have really taken to him. They can see he's different, but they really do make a lot of effort, the other children, to include him. Really amazing what the little
Oh.
children do, and to make sure that everybody is included.
And I think at that age as well, it's such a young age that children are naturally inclusive, aren't they? They don't discriminate. They don't. All these kind of early discriminations come from a wider context and their experiences and the environment and the people around them. So, children don't generally discriminate at that age. So it's really lovely that the nursery is obviously, like you say, it's a really good one. That it's really encouraging and embracing of that diversity, and that he's clearly having
Absolutely,
a great
absolutely,
time.
and it does also make you wonder about how with young children they like you say they don't discriminate, and it's like as they get older, what is it that's actually what changes that,
Yeah.
and that's it's a shame that a lot lose that approach.
Yeah, I recently finished a research project actually, and we were commissioned by a local authority to look at the processes and procedures of settings reporting prejudice, but we were focused in early years. So it was an unusual one to do because we talk about children, young children, secondary school children, and obviously adults being prejudiced and being discriminative against other people. But this was focused in early year settings. So it's that kind of idea of differentiating between a child knowingly being prejudiced and discriminating, or are they just kind of as part of their development stage, are they just looking at another child and commenting on what they can see? Oh, that child has brown skin, for instance. Is that just an observation by the child and they're getting to know their surroundings and they're just being open and honest, or is it said with a negative kind of discourse behind it? And as part of that project, we kind of looked at where these comments and behaviours were coming from, and whether it was influenced by the wider families, and subsequently how the settings then went on to decide whether it was worth reporting as a prejudice comment or behaviour, and then how they dealt with it and included the families thereon. And it was such a fascinating project to be part of, because there isn't very much out there in the literature about prejudice at that young age of early years, 2, 3, 4, 5 year olds. You think, how do they knowingly make these comments? But some of them were speaking and behaving in a way that they had seen people around them do it, and that's kind of, it's already filtering in at 3, 4 years old, which is, it's sad. It's really sad. And so it's lovely to hear that Phoenix's experience at that age, he's experienced in a very positive environment because of any differences that he may be displaying to the other children. So that's great. How did you find finding a specialist school for your daughter? And was it an easy process? And did you have to, was she mainstream before she went to specialist school?
Yeah, she was in a mainstream setting, and she unfortunately didn't have any HCP, although
Right. Yeah.
she is diagnosed autistic and dyslexic. So she on the sort of send radar within the school itself, but she found it very difficult to attend school, and
Yeah.
she um, she found that being in larger class sizes is very overwhelming, but, busy corridors and so on. And she used to have quite a few meltdowns as well when at school. So she ended up refusing to go into the school. Well, that's
Right.
I don't like using the term refusing actually because it's actually not. It makes it sound it's a child's issue, whereas it's not.
Yeah.
It's societal. It's the environmental issue. So rather, she found it inaccessible. Um,
Yeah.
and so because she found it inaccessible, she was incredibly anxious and it was very debilitating for her. So it took about 2.5 years in total to get an EHCP in
Okay.
the end,
Oh wow.
to gather the evidence for it and things. Because an issue was that because she wasn't attending the school weren't able to get the evidence kind of thing of what it's like
Oh,
for a
I
Sophie to be in
see.
school. So we were kind of in a catch-22 quite a bit, and we were trying to find ways of making school accessible to a degree so she doesn't get overwhelmed. So in the end, we managed to get the HCP, and the HCP process from triggering to finish was really quick. Actually, it
Okay.
only took a few months. It's the actual making sure they got the robust evidence first. That's the bit that takes the time.
Hmm.
And I was quite keen to make sure I'm working with the school to get this evidence going, as well as working with Sophie, rather than having to go at the school for not being quick at this and so on. So it was really important that it is a team effort. When the school agree that she needs an HCP, and we have the information that we've got at home, it was a team's
Yeah.
effort to get it across the line. But once the EHCP application was triggered off, there's statutory deadlines that the local authority has to meet. So that's what
Okay.
made sure that the process happened as it did. And it took the actual getting the HCP didn't take so long, but seeking a placement for her took a bit longer.
Right.
But she did eventually find a provision local to us that can meet her needs. So yeah, and now she's in a good place. But the only downside is that she's struggling with knowledge gap now. That's because of not being in school for so long.
Oh, okay.
But on the flip side, she has actually developed other skills. She's developed her literacy skills herself through reading books that she's interested in and using audio books in the
Yeah.
background to read it to her. So
Oh, that's a
she
good
has been
idea.
developing her own literacy abilities. She also has her own YouTube channel,
Oh,
and she's met some people online, some friends online, and she's very wise when it comes to online safety, and she just developed her language and communication that way. So she didn't need to be in school for that bit, and that's been great. But what she hasn't been able to do is subjects like mathematics and so on, so
yeah.
although she's where she needs to be in terms of some of the more creative subjects when it comes to things like science and maths, because it doesn't have a particular interest in them subject areas.
Yeah.
She's got quite a significant knowledge gap, and so that's what she's working on at the moment. But the good thing is she's only in year 8, so she's got plenty of time to
Yeah.
catch it all up, and she's got a very positive attitude to her studies. So yeah, so far so good.
Oh, that's really good. And it's interesting that you say about the going back to the EHCP process and how, you know, struggle to gather the evidence at school because of her not attending. And I recently went to an autistic provision school. They had like an open day, and we was able to go and listen to some talks and have a tour around the school and everything, and it was a fantastic provision. And there were some people there who were part of the EHCP process and was talking about how it's really difficult, same with the assessment process as well. It's really difficult to gather the information because you have to gather it from home, from school. You know, there are different avenues that you have to gather it from. So for those children that are not accessing school, or for those children who mask at school and then come home and relax and drop the mask, school are like, no, they're doing fine. You know, they're absolutely fine. They're progressing along fine. Or, you know, the issue is, oh, they're just not attending. They're not looking at the reasons behind it. So then it delays either an assessment or, you know, a process like the HCP. So they were kind of, what's the word I'm looking for, like pushing for there to be less onus on the school having to have the proof, the evidence of it, and them having more kind of belief and encouragement from the family side of things, that actually parents know their children better than anybody knows their children. So, you know, let's allow them to have a bit more say in this kind of process. So I didn't even think of it as like when the children are struggling to access school, that actually that would have an impact on gathering evidence for it to then go on and get more support. And you're right, it does seem very much like a catch-22 situation. And I think it's, as with anything, I think there are always little holes in things that they can fix as they go along to try and make the process better and more straightforward. But
Yeah,
I don't know what the answer is to that.
well, that's the thing. I mean, Sophie's just one example, and there's many, many, many children who struggle to access the mainstream education and do not have an HCP. And you think about the sort of the loss of development there is really quite significant.
Yeah.
And so and then there's also the issue of the volume of the HCP applications as well. And
Hmm.
and Senkos have a really difficult task of trying to gather evidence of multiple children in their school when parents are asked them for an EHCP. And if you
Yeah.
go to school with a high proportion of send children without EHCPs, and you've got a lot of parents asking for EHCPs, that evidence gathering mountain must be incredibly difficult for Senkos.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and meanwhile, there's a number of children not going into school. So there's a big
Hmm.
issue with the volume in the system, and the process itself is in depth as it is. Once the local authority agrees to an EHCP assessment, to
Yeah.
sort of find out what it is that the child needs, and even that, it's a sit down at least an hour conversation with the child, with the parents, as a group, with the school and things like. And you think about how many times that psychologists, ed psychs have to do that as well. So there's
Yeah.
the system is clogged basically, and what's happening as a result of that is that lots of children who are at home wondering what's happening with their futures.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
and that's one of the reasons why that in the future, I once I've completed my Doctor of Education, is that I would want to look at opening an alternative provision specifically for children without an EHCP, who are in this
Mhm.
position, so that way evidence can be gathered whilst at this alternative provision, that also seeks to help with therapeutic support and also some outreach support for the mainstream host school, in sort of seeking to remove some of these social barriers. I mean,
Mhm.
that's my aspiration. So anything can change in the next few years. We've got a general election coming up, haven't we? So it can all change again. But um, it's a real issue, the HCPs, and I think also sometimes I wonder if there's an appreciation of the amount and volume of evidence that's needed, and
Right.
there's a lot of inefficiencies in that. It's I want to say it's not an efficient system. It's a broken system really, because it's just not working. And a lot of
Yeah.
children are going without support.
Yeah, I want to say I've been fortunate that I've not had to go through that EHCP process, but in the same breath, it is not a fortunate position because my daughter went through school without one. She didn't get a diagnosis of ADHD and ASD until she was 16, so she had already finished school. She just finished her GCSEs, and then we got her formal diagnosis. And as you know, I deregistered her from school when she was 14, so she was home educated from 14 because the mainstream system just wasn't fit for her. She couldn't access it in the way that she needed to, and it was causing more kind of problems than it was allowing her to thrive. So we were in the position where we could deregister her, and she was home educated, and then she did her final year of schooling in a 14 to 16 provision at college and did her GCSEs that way. But she was kind of on the radar when she joined secondary school, because we had a diagnosis of APD, auditory processing disorder, from quite young. She always seemed to have issues with processing sound. We thought when she was younger that I say we thought, we kept getting told by the doctors that it was glue ear and that she'd grow out of it. And this kind of went on. And then when she was kind of 8, 9, 10, they were like, oh, they normally grow out of it by like 7, 8, and she's still failing these hearing tests, so maybe it's not glue ear. And it kind of went on from there. And we now know, now that she's had her formal diagnosis, it's part of her sensory processing disorder that she doesn't process sound. But it was quite upsetting. I'm going off on a tangent here, but I remember it being quite upsetting in one of her final auditory assessments, where they said actually her ears, they could tell by how the ears were reacting and how the eardrum was vibrating, all these things. They were like, the sound is going in. Like, she's not got hearing problems. She's not partially deaf, as what we thought for many years. She actually had a hearing aid for a number of years as well, because we thought that she was partially deaf. And they were like, your ears are working fine. So she felt like they were saying, well, you're lying. What are you talking about? You can't hear. You're lying. And she was like, but I can't hear properly. And she, you'd ask her a question and she'd be like, what? And then halfway through repeating the question, she'd answer it because she was there with it. She then processed it. But it took her so many years to get that diagnosis. But she had APD diagnosis when she was in school. So because of that, she had a student passport, which meant that all of the teachers were made aware, were supposed to be, they weren't, but they were supposed to be made aware that she had trouble with hearing. So she had to sit at the front of the class. She had to make sure that the teachers were always facing her when they spoke, because she lip read a lot, especially in noisy situations, which classrooms generally are. And they had to make sure they weren't standing in front of a window with the glare behind, so she could clearly see their face. So she had this student passport, but it wasn't effective because not all teachers read it, and they didn't put in the provision that was on there. But she kept kind of failing the tests that they were doing to see if she needed help for her GCSEs and things like that. And they kept saying, no, she's not bad enough to warrant any additional help. And it was only removing her from school. She was on the assessment pathway. She thrived learning at home and then in the alternate provision at the college. And then we got this diagnosis, and it was like, oh, this is what we've been looking for. But all that stress was all without having to even go on the pathway of getting an EHCP. So I can't imagine how much additional stress that adds on a person to say, actually, you've got to gather all this evidence now. And this was the other thing, is when she went through her ASD and ADHD assessment, they said, oh, we need evidence from the school. As you've said, you need to have evidence from all these different avenues. And she wasn't at school, she was home educated. So we got our evidence from friends and family, as well as from the evidence that I could provide from home, and that was sufficient. So putting the pressure on families that you have to have the school evidence when the child is either not accessing, like your child was, or the child is not at school, or the child masks at school. So I feel very strongly that there shouldn't be this onus placed on the school, that if the school say the child's fine, that's it, they're fine.
It's an artificial environment, isn't it? And research has shown autistic girls in particular are very good at masking.
Yeah.
And that was
Yeah.
the issue, I think, that Sophie found, was that she was so good at masking through her first school and the start of her middle school, that she it wasn't generally picked up. And it was when we were trying to before she had the diagnosis, we tried to ask the first school to investigate and look at it, but she was fine in
Right.
school. And so she's not that she's fine in school, but she is masking. When she gets home, she goes pop.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
because she's now in an environment that is safe for her, which is at home. And so it took a while. So we had to go private in the end to get the ASD ASC
Okay.
diagnosis. We had to go private. We went private for a dyslexia one as well, and and then she has the diagnosis. And so I agree. Actually, I think that there has to be they need to look at the two in balance, really, the two environments in balance, and how they interact with each other as well. Because if you've got a difference in behaviours at home compared to behaviours at school and so on, and there's a blatant contrast, then you've got to
Yeah.
ask the question: are we masking here? And
Hmm.
and I think I agree. I think there has to be more a greater emphasis on parents' knowledge of their children, especially when you've known them
Yeah.
longer. Um,
Yeah.
and you've seen a lot of things how the children develop, and utilizing the school environment if they're accessing it for additional evidence. So yeah, centralize the
Hmm.
evidence around family life and then go from there.
Mm.
It's a difficult process, isn't it? And especially I mean, the powers for parents to trigger off the HCP process is a positive thing, but there's a risk there of triggering it off too quickly without gathering the evidence first. Because
Right.
once you trigger off the HCP process, then the local authority have to act straight away.
Right.
And then that only gives you a very short time frame to gather a lot of evidence. So really, I mean, my general advice is you keep gathering evidence as you go along. It's certainly what we're doing with Phoenix.
Yeah.
So we've got that. We've got speech and language now specialist play, the nursery of recording things that happen that especially when he's having emotional moments.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're just gathering these things together to the point where it's like, right, we've now got what we need. Now let's trigger the EHCP. So, and then
Hmm.
that way, we've invested more time in the evidence gathering to get more quality evidence, and that's the approach that was taken with Sophie.
Okay.
So the more preparation before triggering the HCP, the more evidence you can gather before the HCP process is triggered, the higher the chance of it going through. So
Hmm.
that's something that I definitely learned with Sophie, and what we're doing with Phoenix.
I think that's really good advice and really valuable for people to know, because I think it's, as a parent, it's quite easy to almost have a knee-jerk reaction, isn't it? Of, okay, I've identified a challenge, an issue. Let's put things in motion, especially because we know that generally for a lot of these services, there's a waiting list. So yeah, I think it's a bit of a knee-jerk reaction, isn't it, to kind of go, I want to help my child. Okay, let's start this. But actually, what you said, that's really valuable for people to know and have a heads up on, because if you can gather that, it ultimately will make the process more efficient and a better outcome, hopefully.
Especially in the early years as well, because Phoenix is in a setting that's really good. It's a nursery that's in a school, so happens to be Sophie's first school,
Oh,
and I think that they have also sort of understood our frustrations with not putting Sophie forward, and then it turns out that she is autistic. Um,
right.
so, and the way that they're developing and working with Phoenix is really good, and it is again it's a team approach, and it is really important to work with the school, and schools tend to react better when you're positive with them. So, like anybody, that's human
Yeah.
nature, isn't it? And
Yeah.
and the other thing that I also learnt with, because I learnt a lot with the process with Sophie as well when she started not when she started to find school inaccessible, and it's very easy to ring in when she gets distressed and ring in and say I'm keeping her off, rather than saying that Sophie is finding school inaccessible. Sophie's too anxious to attend school, because it's actually when I say I'm going to keep her off, then the school's if the right word is jurisdiction in terms of education can end at that point, because it's the parent making the decision, not the child, not to attend school.
Right. Okay.
And so the school don't tend to respond very quickly when that happens. So that so they don't
Hmm.
because they can say the reason for non-attendance is because the parent's making the active choice.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Whereas we change what we said to Sophie's finding it inaccessible. She's too anxious to attend school, etc. So we're keeping the focus on the social element of the environment that she's going into as being a barrier.
Hmm.
So basically, coming away from the parent being the problem in refusing to go into school or keeping her off. So there's a problem in your setting. Can we sort it out, please?
Yeah.
And the school are still then they have to act on that because it's their environment. Because if it's inaccessible
Hmm.
for a child, then there's it implies discrimination. So they have to
Hmm.
act on it. So that's the other bit of advice is that's is don't is not to. It's still the same thing. The child's going to be off the school and so on, but it's always got to be that the child is too anxious to attend rather than
Yeah.
I'm keeping them off.
Hmm.
It's really little things like that made a real big difference. So being positive and being positive with the school and showing desire that you want the child in school, but
Yeah.
at the same time, the reason for the child's not attendance is because they're too anxious to attend because of A, B, and C. And then if you
Hmm.
have a list of things that have happened, that's even better. So the schools, schools do want to help, and that's the thing and as an educator myself, schools want to help all the children. They really do.
Yeah.
They're under a lot of pressures from external sources, and we just talked about the Senkos, the volume that Senkos have to deal with, and so on.
Yeah.
It's not easy for them to do what they want to do because nobody really goes into the teaching profession not wanting to help the children.
Yeah. Of course. Yeah.
So it's not and that's the thing is that it's not that people do not want to help. It's just that the system itself is so clogged up and incredibly difficult for Senkos and head teachers to really do something about it in the timely manner that's needed.
Mm. That's a really really good point, and again some really good valuable advice for people on how to approach these situations, because it can, I think, I mean, terminology is a whole other conversation and could go on for hours,
Yes,
especially within kind of neurodiversity. But terminology is important, and it gives perspective, doesn't it? So even just kind of the way, like you say, the way you're wording it changes the whole perspective on what the issue is and how to resolve the issue, rather than it being something that, like you say, is the child's fault, is the parent's fault. But coming at it as saying, actually, this is the issue, and being clear about where the challenge is means that everyone involved, all of the stakeholders involved in that child's education, can work together and go, right, let's get to the bottom of this problem. So yeah, I think that's a really good piece of advice. I'd just like to move on a little and talk about Bethany, if I may. You sadly lost Bethany when she was really young. Are you able to talk a little bit about that with us?
Yeah, it was 14, come up to 14 years ago now, but I can still remember
No.
it as though it was yesterday, because it was just next door to where I am now. Yeah, I can remember it really, really clear as day. But it's not something you can ever again prepare for, because
Yeah.
just prior, a couple of years before Bethany died, me and my wife got married in Malta, and we were on our way home from a restaurant with Bethany, and a car, as we were crossing the road, a car came driving really quickly round the corner and nearly knocked over Bethany. And I remember the conversation that me and my wife had on the way back, when we were sort of talking about it. Oh, I don't know what it'd be like if we'd have lost Bethany then, and things like that, And
Yeah.
just 2 years later, then the unthinkable actually happened, and it's safe to say we didn't know at all what it was going to be like. It's just not possible unless you go through it.
Yeah.
So I mean, what happened? She had a temperature the night before, and we just gave her Calpol as you would do normally, and unintended product placement there. Um,
There are other products available.
there are other products available, but either which way, we gave her the medicine, and it was bringing the temperature down, just doing what parents would do with a child that had a high temperature.
Yeah, of course.
Um, but then when we got up the next morning and I was going to get her ready for nursery, I found her in a room. She was face down, um, and she wasn't responding to our calls to wake up. So I rubbed her on her shoulder to try and wake her up, and there's no movement. But then I realised that she was really cold.
Right.
And then when I turned her over, um, her eyes were rolled up into her head, and she had red circles which were pooling around her legs. Um, which is what
Mm.
happens when the heart stops beating, the blood just settles.
Right.
So yeah, so I shouted across to my wife to call an ambulance quickly because she wasn't breathing and wasn't responsive, and I just gave her CPR for as much as she could, because there was no way I was going to let her go without a battle. And
Of course, yeah.
yeah, the paramedics arrived, and they immediately picked Bethany up and took her straight to the ambulance, and drove straight to the hospital. And I just remember when we arrived at the hospital in the second ambulance, that I couldn't, the paramedic couldn't have run fast enough. She really darted in with Bethany as quickly as possible to the doctors.
Oh,
And yeah, it was about an hour later. We were in it's like kind of like a waiting room, in,
yeah.
as you imagine, total distress. Um, and it was about an hour later that the doctor came in and said they couldn't revive her, and asking our permission to stop trying to revive
Oh
her.
gosh.
Colleen, my wife, she just couldn't speak at all. She was really distressed. So I made the decision, and that I gave the permission to stop reviving, and I felt awful. I felt a complete failure as a father, because as a father, you're supposed to protect your children, and it devastated me beyond belief, and I just remember completely collapsing then at that point, because up until that point I was able to shut emotions off, um,
Yeah.
which is one of the things that later on how I discovered that I'm autistic. But I was able to shut my emotions off and focus on trying to bring her back and get her to the hospital and support my wife,
Yeah.
and contact various people like my work and my family, and I was still trying to motor through that. But then at that point, when they gave that permission,
Yeah.
I felt like the emotions hit me harder than a freight train would, and
Yeah.
I was completely total wreck. Um, my parents came down around that time as well. Then at that point, and they looked after us. And other family members came as well, and yeah, and then they the hospital then laid Bethany in the chapel arrest um, for us to go and say our goodbyes. And just remember going into that room, and it just felt so surreal. It was like
Mm.
it was like this was just a nightmare, and I wanted to wake up. It sounds cliche, but that's how it did really feel like it was a nightmare. It was just didn't seem real at all. And yeah, so when we went into the chapel rest, she's there in the middle with a blanket over her, um, and the candles in the corners. It was dim lighting, and I just remember apologising to Bethany constantly, and I promised that I'll find out what happened and what did I do wrong, and so on. And I was really focused on that for quite a long time afterwards. Um, and then sort of like formalities started to happen. Police came round then and spoke to us. So because with a child death, they have to investigate. That's
Of
just, that is
course, yeah.
that's just the procedure. But because
Which in itself must be so hard as you've just gone through it and then having to kind of go through that sort of process after with the police. I can't imagine
well, that's the
how that must have.
it was horrible because I was already feeling as though I'd failed, and because I was the last person to see Bethany alive and the first person to find her not, the police were quite
Yeah,
interested in my actions around the time. So then I'm immediately
yeah,
then turning around. That kind of started to reconfirm my own opinions of myself at the time.
yeah.
And so I just I was just sinking deeper and deeper as a result, basically. Now the police backed off after the autopsy that said that it was natural causes, unknown
Yeah.
etiology. So it was nothing sinister, basically. So the police then were done then at that point, and it was all down then to coroner after that to investigate that cause of death. Um, but
Mm.
other than a slightly enlarged heart, they couldn't see any causes. So the only thing that they could think is that the virus that she had the night before stopped her heart.
Wow.
But unfortunately, on the day, because of the chaos that was going on in the morning with Bethany and so on, the hospital staff lost Bethany's blood samples, which would have told us what the virus was.
No.
So the virus itself obviously dies when the host dies, but can still have remnants afterwards. But they lost the blood
Okay.
samples, so that's why we will never know now
Oh,
what actually happened.
oh gosh.
But what I do remember is because I gave Bethany mouth to mouth when I was doing the CPR.
Yeah.
The following week, I was floored with an illness.
Really?
Yeah, but we didn't make connection at that point. But it was horrible. It was floored me completely. We didn't make the connection at the
Wow.
time because it was only a week later.
Yeah, yeah.
And a week later, I was barely communicating. So yeah, it was a horrible time there. But my parents were, well, they've always have been my heroes, but they were absolutely outstanding. And for them, it was a double hit, really, as well, because their granddaughter had
Yeah,
just died, and their son is in um, serious emotional distress. And that's got to be
yeah,
horrible for them as well, But they held it together as much as they possibly could. Um, and yeah, I think that the most important thing that happened after that was focusing on the funeral, which gave a focus to say our goodbyes properly with support with everybody. But also, yeah, the GP, the GP helped with the sleeping because I couldn't sleep for days, because I was
yeah,
because I said now that I know I'm autistic because I'm monotropic, um, this became my special interest basically. So I could not,
right.
so I was intensely focused on this, but at the time I didn't know
Yeah,
that, so I couldn't sleep because I was constantly trying to figure out what did I miss, what did I do wrong, and during the first couple
yeah,
of weeks was when the police were still investigating. So it's kind of like, what did I miss? What did I go wrong? And how did I let that happen? And all these kind of questions, and trying to think of different ways I could have done things differently. Would that have prevented it? And so on. I did that for so long
Mm,
that I ended up in depression, and that affected everything in my life then after that. And
yeah.
yeah, and it wasn't until 2017 that I eventually burnt out and had an autistic burnout because I got to the point where I could no longer figure out what I missed, and I finally accepted that there was nothing I could do.
Yeah.
So the thing is with being monotropic is that people can keep telling me that it wasn't my fault, but because I was so intensely focused on it, I'm disregarding
Yeah.
what people are
Won't
saying,
hear it.
and
Yeah.
that's basically what I did for so long, and that's why I'm in a permanent depression now. But I'm managing it now. I know how to manage it. So yeah, I hit a significant burnout. My career took a nosedive. Um, but then I had about 6 months recovery in total, and and then that's when my GP picked up all the traits that I was displaying, and suggested we explore being autistic, and
Okay.
that then led to my diagnosis in 2019. But even before the diagnosis, I was exploring it anyway as a possibility, and
Right.
a lot of things
Yeah.
made a lot of sense.
Mm,
And then when my diagnosis occurred in 2019, I broke down in tears because it was such a relief. And that was 2019 was the start of my rebuild, if you like. As-
yeah.
and I'm on a newish journey at the moment. So yeah, I can talk about that. There's quite a lot. There's so many different experiences. And how it felt. I mean, one way I used to describe it when Bethany died was it was like staring into a complete void
Yeah.
because everything that I thought I had planned for the future had literally been destroyed, and there was just nothing in front of me. I could visualize, and my visualizing was very much preoccupied by trying to figure out what could I've done to stop it from happening.
Yeah. I guess as well, not having the answers, even, afterwards, and you saying, the bloods were lost, so you didn't have the answers. I imagine, do you ever get full closure from it after that? Because you don't ever have all of the answers.
Um, it's an interesting one, that one. That question, because yes, we will never have the answers to what happened to Bethany, but what we've accepted is that it can happen,
Yeah.
because quite often people can go through life that don't have that lived experience of thinking it won't happen to them, and
Yeah.
and we were like that before Bethany died. You plan your life as though nothing's going to happen. And people should, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying they shouldn't. They shouldn't live their life
Yeah.
terrified every day. Absolutely not. But you've got to live every day as it comes at the same time. And
Yeah.
I think for us, it turned into, how does Bethany now exist with us? Because
Yeah.
whether we know the answers or not know the answers is not going to change the outcome. But what we can do is honour a memory,
Yeah.
and that's why that's one of the reasons why I continue with the Memorial Ice Hockey Festival that I hold each year, and
Hmm.
also she inspires me in different ways, and so her existence now for us is not in person, but it is in spirit, and she's
Yeah.
very much in our hearts and everywhere around us, and in the decisions of what we do, because of we have to live on, and at the same time we have to live on because Bethany's got two younger siblings, um,
Yes. Yeah.
and you know it's we have to approach it in a different way. We because it knowing the answers or not knowing the answers won't change the outcome. But recently, in my own genetics, because of my heart condition, which was only discovered a few years afterwards,
Oh, okay.
and that's a whole other story that's related to Bethany's death. We are they found a bit of an anomaly in my genetics that's because of new research. They found a new anomaly which could link. So they're just exploring that now.
Wow.
But that's the thing, you see, because you know, medical science back 14 years ago may not have had the information at the time. Whereas now, 14 years on, more research into medical
Yeah.
science, into sudden arrhythmic deaths and
Yeah. It
things.
develops,
You
doesn't
know,
it?
then all of a sudden there's like,
Yeah.
oh, hang on, that's uncovered something. So that's something that's just recently popped up. But
Okay.
yeah, that's the other aspect in terms of my heart condition. It appears that I completely developed cardiomyopathy as a result of from Bethany's death. The stress
Oh, wow.
from being
Really?
depression and then 7 years of intense focus and so on. Because none of my family, and we all got tested after Bethany's passing for cardiomyopathy because it was picked up in me first, and then the whole family were tested,
Okay.
and nobody has those genetics.
No
So
one.
so it appears that I
Wow.
developed it, and
Okay.
that's why it got missed in the first year. But in 2015, that was when I was. Sorry, 2014. That's when it got picked up, and it appears that I literally have a broken heart.
Wow.
So that's yeah, still a lot of things ongoing, even 14 years on, really. But we're moving forward with life now because that's what Bethany would want us to do.
Hmm.
And as long as she's sat up there on those clouds, looking down at us, feeling proud of what we're achieving, then that's our life.
Absolutely. Where do you get your support from? Like as a grieving father, as a family, was there much support on offer in kind of immediately after, and then in the years that follow when the support is still very much needed? Do you get a lot of support?
In the earlier days, definitely. I mean, the charity that I'm fundraising for right now were awesome.
Okay.
And so there's a bit of a shout out for Hope House Children's Hospices because they picked us up really quickly, and the bereavement service did. We had weekly counselling. The counsellor even came to our house,
Okay.
travelled all the way from Oswald Street to Redditch to see us, see how we are, helped us to bring Bethany's room back into the house again because we shut it away for so long,
Yeah.
and helped us to transition. And they were fantastic, absolutely fantastic. And we've had various sort of like group sessions and so on as well, and it's been a lot of support there that are very aware of what child bereavement is like, because it's very different and very intense bereavement. Because if you lose somebody's a grandparent or something, that's a general expectation from the natural order of life side of things, but no one ever expects to lose the child
Yeah.
or outlive their children,
Yeah.
and it's very different form of grief. And yeah, they were great. And there was also Edward's Trust in Birmingham who are really good as well for a few years, and went on a couple of retreats, fathers retreats, because fathers don't get as much of a focus when it comes to bereavement sometimes, I notice,
Yeah.
because that was the thing I picked up as well, which really, well, my emotions was high on the day Beth died anyway, but the the support was all going to Colleen,
Yeah.
whereas I wasn't getting any looking at all really, and it was like, I've lost my child too. I might not show it,
Exactly.
and I
Yeah.
might be masking, but it just felt a bit imbalanced, really.
Yeah.
And I was getting quite annoyed with that. And when they brought Bethany's body in at first, before they took her to the chapel of rest, they offered for Cole to hold her, so she did. She held and hugged her, and then they were about to take her away. And I was thinking, you're not going to ask me,
What about me? Yeah.
and I just think, but as I've spoken to lots of bereaved fathers since, that's not an uncommon thing.
Oh, it's
Um,
awful.
and I do think the bereaved fathers get forgotten about sometimes. I
Yeah.
think it's got better at that, better now, but because males don't tend to ask for help as much, it doesn't mean that they don't need it.
No, absolutely.
But yeah, it's that support's been quite good. But in the last sort of few years, other than family, there's not that I don't get other than monitoring my medication as well, and so I think my focus very much
Yeah,
nowadays has been on my physical health rather than my mental health. But my mental health will be where it is, but it's generally managed. So, but now that I understand more about my own neurodivergence now as well, that's made a big difference
yeah,
because I've been able to keep my focus now on my academic studies now, which I really enjoy.
yeah.
So that's picked me up. But it's my physical health that really is the bit that's being focused on.
Yeah, you have to make sure that you look after yourself. You mentioned briefly that you set up this annual memorial ice hockey festival in memory of Bethany, which sounds incredible. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I started it in 2015 because I needed something during what was every year, and we're approaching the anniversary now. We
Okay,
the anniversary of a death is a very difficult time of the year.
of course.
So I decided to try and put something very bright in during a very dark time. So I thought if I hold a charity event in her memory, then I'm doing something positive. That's
Yeah,
sort of something to look forward to in memory of Bethany. And so that's why I initially set it off. The thing is, it grew. um, because it started off with just being an ice hockey memorial charity match the first year, but then after that I started to introduce a tournament in there as well with lots of teams, and now we tend
right.
every year it's a memorial match along with a 19 tournament after that, and which spans the whole weekend, and
Wow.
raising money for various charities, and it was heart-related charities at first, and then now it's Hope House as a thank you for all that they've done. And yeah, we got one. The next one's coming up on the anniversary of Bethany's death this year, and 22nd of June is the memorial match, and the 23rd. But unfortunately, I can't play at the moment because of my heart. Um,
Right.
but I'm hoping that sometime in the future I'll be able to get back into it. But I did play in the pre-pandemic memorial matches and thoroughly enjoyed the experience.
Yeah. It sounds great, and it's like you say, putting something positive in such a dark period of time. I imagine that's one way of helping you get through that time each year when it comes
Yeah,
around.
I was kind of adapting a strategy that Hope House showed me about dealing with the PTSD side of things. That
Okay.
I had PTSD for a couple of years whenever I was walking past Bethany's room.
Yeah.
Because I'm a visual thinker, it was replacing the image of Bethany's death of that morning with a more positive image
Yeah.
of Bethany when she's alive. And I just thought I could probably do that on the weekend because all I remember on that over that particular day is that whole experience of the whole day. So what I needed was something that's a whole experience in a day over that's more positive. So it redirects my attention towards something that's more positive, and you know, and like I said, it's in honor of Bethany, and the support
Mhm.
I've had from the ice hockey community has been tremendous. Not just in the UK, I've had a few from other countries as well, posting our
Really?
posting our posts when we say about what we've done. So
Oh,
it's
brilliant.
yeah, so it's and then now it is just I do it every year now, not just because of the well, I don't really do it much now about the replacing of the anniversary. It is much more about this is Bethany. She likes having fun and getting people together. Um,
Yeah.
and uh, and and the ice hockey players that get involved, and there's usually easily about 150 of them that play each time, and are constantly saying whenever I'm thinking, oh, I might do one next year, they're like, no, you're doing one next year. So the ice hockey players themselves want to keep it going, and so I'm thinking, all right
That's
then, let's keep
great.
going then. So
Yeah,
and that
absolutely.
it's it's all very good.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And what I'll do is if you've got some links for some more information where they can donate and things like that, I'll pop them under the episode so people can donate if they want to. They can follow through and find out more information about it and follow its annual journey. That would be great if you've got
Brilliant.
some links and that you can share.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Thank you.
Brilliant. No worries. So I just want to move on a little bit to talk about what you're doing now, and all the wonderful work you're doing in and around neurodiversity, because you are very prominent on all of the social medias that I come across with you on, around neurodiversity. And you're obviously very knowledgeable and passionate about this area, which is great. You founded Embrace Neurodiversity in 2022, and then Neurodiversity in Education, which we said was the CIC, in 2023. So can you tell us a bit about what they are and what it is that you do with each of those?
Yeah, I mean, during the MBA, I wanted to focus on neurodiversity within the education workforce, and
Yeah.
because having discovered my own neurodivergence, although I knew about being dyslexic beforehand, but when I then discovered about being autistic, um, then it prompted me to sort of think about the how my neurodivergence works affects me, or how society affects my neurodivergence. That way around
Yeah.
as well. So I looked
Yeah.
into. So that's why one of the reasons why I wanted to do an MBA was that, and this was the pandemic had just started, so I needed a focus that helped me to get through the pandemic whilst also um, uh, doing my job. And so
Yeah.
I explored neurodiversity as part of my postgraduate major project, and looking at the disabling factors that affect the strategic advantage for further education college that I was working at the time, and it fascinated me the how neurodivergent educators were finding things very, very difficult um, working within environments that were very neuronormative, so more built and run by neurotypical people. And
Right.
and I think about my own experience prior to that, after Bethany's death, my perceptions on the world changed significantly. That everything that
Yeah.
was in my world no longer made sense to me. And so I was very interested in what was causing all that turmoil. And I was also thinking about how my neurodivergent traits were working together that resulted in me going into depression. And when I
Hmm.
think about the rejection sensitivity, the monotropism, and my visual perception abilities, those three things were working really strongly together on trying to figure out what happened to Bethany, that it drove me
Right.
into depression. And so
Yeah.
it, it made me think that I'm not the only neurodivergent person on the planet, and how many teachers are neurodivergent, and and over the years I've met many neurodivergent teachers who are all sharing the same kind of experiences of working in education as I have, and I just think
Hmm.
there's a real gap here. So so after I graduated with the MBA, I decided I'm going to pursue the Doctor of Education. And at the moment, I'm going to be researching neurodivergence in the education workforce, and specifically how education leadership and management practice affects the experiences of neurodivergent teachers comparing to neurotypical peers,
Okay.
and potentially basing that upon the double empathy problem. So I'll frame it around the double empathy problem. That's where I'm at the moment. But I decided, in terms of neurodiversity, embrace neurodiversity at first. That was born out of the one of my units I did in the MBA,
Right.
where I created a model I built a model using management theory, basically, to cross-reference different neurodivergent profiles, and to create strengths, and look at what the strengths are and what the challenges are, and where reasonable adjustments needed to be focused, and so on. So it became very
Okay.
um, tailored towards the individual rather than tailored towards a particular profile.
Right. I see.
So coming away from the tick sheet approach that, okay, autism, right, these are what you need to do, A, B, and C, when actually when you meet one autistic person, you meet one autistic person.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with neurodivergent people.
Hmm.
So through the Anglia Ruskin University Shoke program, which is brilliant. They really encouraged me to enter a competition, the Big Pitch, and I thought, yeah, why not? Because with the Big Pitch, if I can get to the boot camp, I'm going to get some business management training and how to run a business and things like that. I thought that'd be really good. So I had
Brilliant.
no
Yeah.
expectations of how far it was going to go. So I did the minute long entry video, thanks to my daughter Sophie, who's incredibly incredible on technology. She helped me, she taught me how to use all this different software and things that I never heard of.
Awesome.
Um, and and I create that's the great thing about Generation Alpha children, they know this stuff. Um,
Absolutely.
so
Yep.
And yeah, I got through to the boot camp, so I was happy there. After that, there's 20 businesses in there competing, and then I did my pitch, I submitted my business plan and things, and then all of a sudden I got through to the grand final, which was a shock.
Oh.
Um, and then I got to the grand final and actually got, and then actually won investment, and I was absolutely delighted with it. But by the time I got to the grand final, I was delighted anyway, so I was having fun.
Yeah.
Um, so I set up Embrace Neurodiversity Limited. Then after that, to then help businesses to understand the neuro inclusivity within their teams and how they could support one another, basically to create really strong positive outcomes. And that's how that started off. And I held monthly neurodiversity knowledge exchanges online as well, so people came along to that, and then we'd discuss a topic around inclusion within the workforce. And this is general workforce, so it's not specific to education. Um,
Okay.
yeah, so that's just been carrying on really, and I just coach people who are generally neurodivergent and help them to sort of see their strengths in themselves and also sometimes be a sounding board, or most of the time being a
Mm.
sounding board really to on ideas that they could do, because that's the point of coaching, isn't it? It's got to be client led. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
but neurodiversity in education CIC has come about because of there's a need for it really. And it's I mean we've got neurodiversity in business out there doing some great stuff as well, and then you look at neurodiversity celebration week and all these initiatives which are fantastic, but how often is education actually talked about? And it's not talked about very much, and when it is talked about, it's only focused on children and young people.
Mm.
Very rarely are teachers and the workforce discussed in terms of supporting and being neuroaffirming. And so, and I've already applied to do an ED on this focus. So, but there are many teachers out there and many professionals in education that know what can be done, but not necessarily having the voice in which to do it.
Mm.
So I set up Neurodiversity in Education CIC to try and bring neurodivergent professionals together and talk about the quality of teaching and learning, which is, the bread and butter of what we do,
Yeah.
but also actually how do you support and leverage the knowledge that neurodivergent people have when they're applying their lived experience in the classroom? Because there is some research out there about neurodivergent teachers, but more specifically autistic teachers and dyslexic
Hmm.
teachers, so more of a reductionist kind of approach rather than looking at
Yeah.
neurodivergence. But what they all agree on is that neurodivergent teachers are using their experiences of being neurodivergent when planning their lessons. And I just think,
Okay.
can you imagine disseminating that knowledge across a school to improve the quality of teaching and learning for all the children?
Yeah.
And then maybe there'll be a reduction in the number of children who are becoming too anxious and finding school inaccessible. So I think the answers are actually in the system itself. It's just not being able to be brought out. So neurodiversity in education is kind of bringing all these voices together and trying and be my co-director saying it's a one-stop shop in a way, that
Yeah.
can have these conversations about supporting neurodivergent educators as well as working with the children and young people. And we've got we're going to be launching neurodiversity in education properly this September for our
Okay.
first ever Neurodiversity in Education Week, and which we've just recently announced on LinkedIn. So
Brilliant.
that's going to be exciting coming up too. Yeah, there we go.
Excellent. And the same again. I'll put all of these links and everything to more information and that under the episode, so that people can find out about all of the wonderful things you're doing. I know you and I spoke recently. A small little pre-plug for us, because we're working on a book proposal at the moment, aren't we? You
Yeah.
and I and a colleague from Anglia Ruskin, where I work. So we're working on a book proposal at the moment on neurodiversity in education. And when we were in discussions, and the aspect that you brought in, and the perspective about looking at kind of the teachers involved, and that neurodiversity from an educator's point of view is fascinating. And I'm constantly looking around and trying to read around the topic and the things that you post and things like that, because it is definitely a perspective that I think is lost a lot when talking about neurodiversity in education. And like I say, there is literature out there speaking about kind of children's experiences, but again, and this is something that we discussed before, again, we're talking about that kind of really narrowed focus of autism or ADHD or dyslexia, whereas we're kind of trying to look more broadly at neurodiversity as a more broad topic, rather than kind of honing in, because there is generally more information out there for things like autism, for ADHD, and even dyslexia. They're quite, I don't want to say common, because there still needs to be a lot of work on those areas as well, but they're definitely the more spoken about neurodivergence in individuals than kind of that broader spectrum. And I've seen some really interesting like infographics recently that kind of are putting in all of the different types of neurodivergent conditions that you can have, and it's huge. Like, even things that I didn't even realize would come under that umbrella of that term. So I think it's really important to kind of have that broad look, and that inclusive way of thinking, and therefore the way that practice is happening. And like you say, it'd be great if there could be a bit more of a rollout across the board of this type of practice, and that neurodivergent educators are bringing their own lived experience into it. And I think that's a really important perspective to
Yeah.
look deeper into. And like you say, that's your focus for your doctorate at the moment, which you're working on. How far in are you of your doctorate? How much longer have you
Um,
got left?
I would say, well, I'm almost 1 year into it now, and I'm at the moment developing the theoretical framework for it, and next year I'll be developing the methodology further,
Mhm.
and then year 3 onwards is when I actually jump into action and data gather and write it up. And I'm personally incredibly interested in it. I wouldn't be doing it if I wasn't, and I really enjoy it
Yeah.
too, because it's not just because it's something I want to do, but I feel good doing it at the same time. I do it brings me a lot of joy, and that's something I need to do to build me up again, and that's why I'm doing it. When it comes to at the moment, my thinking right now is where my head's at right now is all that about how neurodivergence is approached, and you were just alluding to it now. And when you've got multiple different profiles of neurodivergence, like autism, ASC, ADHD, and so on like this, that sometimes that leads to the pathologization approach to neurodivergence. And because I mean, the amount of times I've heard someone saying that it's, the reason for a challenge that somebody has is because of a condition rather than the fact that they just have this difficulty, makes it very difficult for people to get past the medical model thinking.
Right. Yeah.
So for example, Simon just done this. Yeah, Simon finds that hard. He's dyslexic. Simon finds that hard. He's autistic. But what does that actually mean? Because there's such variance in autistic people and variance in dyslexic people. It just
Yeah.
you can't sum it up to like one word. Yeah, which is what and that's what people are trying to argue with Ofsted at the moment, is you can't sum a school up with one word. Because there's so much more to it.
Yeah.
It's the same. It's the same
Yeah.
thing with neurotypes. There is so much more to it that one word will not summarize it. So, and what happens with the summarizing, if people are not sure what that profile is, people tend to want to know what to do. and look and seek a magic wand approach to fixing it.
Mm.
And I think that sometimes from a historical concept as well, is that historically any form of neurodivergence was seen as a deficit, and mindsets
Yeah,
starts to change over time, but there is still mindsets, unfortunately, that still treat neurodivergence as a deficit.
absolutely.
And I think that when we talk about neurodivergence, when we're saying about having a reductionist approach to neurodivergence, that means having a set of labels. So in my case, autistic, dyslexic, ADHD, that's not helpful to anybody. If I just say, oh
Hmm.
yeah, I'm autistic and dyslexic and I'm exploring ADHD, what does that mean? Nobody can work with that, you see. Whereas when I start thinking about my neurodivergence, well, I know that some of my strengths of my dyslexia will help me with my challenges with being autistic. So they kind
Yeah,
of balance out. So actually, that doesn't really matter now. So, but what I'm left with is the combined strengths of all my neurotypes and my combined challenges of my neurotypes as well. And that means that I have my own personal set of strengths and challenges, and therefore you can't stick a label on it.
yeah, that makes total sense.
Once we prevent that label from occurring, people can start actually doing something about it. So start
Hmm.
thinking about how you'd embed my strengths into the working environment. So that could be through appraisal, and how do you support my specific challenges, which is your stress risk assessment and reasonable adjustments. So the tools
Hmm.
already out there. It's just the way we think about neurodivergence. And at the moment, because we take that reductionist approach of different badges, people find it difficult to get past that
Hmm.
because they don't know what to do with it. Whereas if you're just keeping it simple in the sense of what do you find that works for you and what doesn't in the context of the environment you're working in, that's the other
Yeah,
important factor. I think things can move forward a bit better and a bit more conversation around actual support needs. But also, if someone's having their strengths embedded as well and are working incredibly well, the effects of the challenges could actually be quite minor sometimes. I'm not
hmm,
a sweeping generalization, but I've always found for me that when my strengths are being utilized, I'm finding that I'm not even thinking about the challenges, I'm just getting by them. But anything that's caused me particular distress would need to be addressed.
hmm.
But the main thing is that neurodivergence is a very, very personal thing, and that's why sort of I personally try to think of it more as neurodivergence as a system of different ways of my brain working rather than autistic, dyslexic.
Yeah, yeah. And actually, you talking there was making me think because obviously I deal with a lot of families. I speak and communicate with a lot of families who home educate, and that's one of my main focuses. And a lot of families speak to me and say, they have deregistered their children because they have challenges at school that aren't being met. And it's interesting what you say about how if the focus is on empowering the strengths of an individual, it can enable the challenges to be, coped with a lot easier because they're no longer that kind of main overlying factor. Whereas these children that are struggling in school every day, their challenges are the biggest thing because they're that's what the focus is, and they're misbehaving, inverted commas, but they're not misbehaving. Their behaviour is a reflection of a need not being met. So when you deregister them and put them in an environment that they are able to thrive in and to focus in on those empowering those strengths, those kind of challenges that were so big in that other environment all of a sudden don't appear to be the dominating factor. And I think that sounds like that could be happening with a lot of the families that are, for example, removing their children from school and home educating. And another thing I was thinking of as well when you were saying that, thinking of my daughter, so she wants to be a paramedic and she's always wanted to, she's had this kind of fixation on being a paramedic. That's been her hyper focus for many, many years, and it's all she's ever wanted to do. And she's so passionate and absolutely loves everything around ambulance, paramedic, NHS, and that's always been her thing. So everything has been geared towards getting her there. And this year, when she turns 18, she can join the ambulance service. So we're all very excited because we feel like we're finally kind of achieving that big milestone that she spent all of her life working towards. But she really struggles with kind of being in a classroom environment and having that focus of sitting at a table for a long period of time. She works incredibly fast. She is incredibly highly academic. So she works fast and she does really high level work as well. So being in school, she was told quite often, you just need to sit and wait for the rest of the class. We've got no more work for you. So then she would have to just sit and wait, which she can't do. She really struggles in that environment. And I remember when she got a bit older and she started really researching the role of a paramedic and things like that. And she came up to me when she'd read this article, and she was like, "Mum, look, it says that a high amount of paramedics actually have ADHD because it's that environment, that fast-paced, quick environment of working it within." And she was like, "This job is perfect for me." And all of a sudden, it was no longer a real negative thing that she couldn't kind of sit at a desk for a period of time. It was like, but I've got this, almost this, I don't know, superpower that she can actually use the strengths that she has, that she now realizes are strengths, and put it into a working environment that she's going to absolutely thrive in. But getting that kind of reassurance from reading an outside person who wrote an article about it to say, oh, actually, this is a good job for somebody with ADHD, it changed the perspective for her, and she was really, really excited about it. So I guess that kind of plays into the idea of acknowledging and empowering the strengths rather than focusing on, actually, I find X, Y, and Z really challenging.
Absolutely, and that also links directly back to the conversation we had earlier about EHCPs and the evidence, because when
Yeah,
evidence is only focused on, I've seen in various places IEPs in schools for SEND children, and they quite often it's sort of the difficulty, the challenges that the student has, and it lists the
yeah,
types, ASC, AD. I say, what do teachers have to work with if that's the kind of information they're getting? Really,
yeah.
look at what is generally in that setting. What do they find difficult, and what do they find is their strength? And the parents are key to knowing that.
Yeah.
And building the IEPs around that rather than being focused heavily on having that diagnosis. Although don't get me wrong, it's important. I think it's important still to go pursue diagnosis, because you get more deep exploration of who you are. But I think when it comes to the HCP process, if we're saying that I need the HCP because my child is autistic and my child is this, that's a general reason for wanting an
Yeah.
HCP, but actually the focus has to be on the strengths and the challenges, and showing that is
Hmm.
very different and dependent on the environment that the child is in as to whether that child can thrive. So it goes back to the whole, we've all done this in our science lessons at some point in our lives, where we were growing plants, one in the cupboard and one on the windowsill,
Right.
and it's the same seed, the same plant, but one grows in
Hmm.
one that's in the cupboard is deprived of light, looks very, very unwell and can't grow to its potential. The one that's in the windowsill has the light. So,
Hmm.
we learnt about this when we were a lot younger in our own schooling, and it's the same thing when it comes to people, is that when they're in the right environment that meets their needs, uh, they will grow and they will
Yeah.
blossom. Hide them away in a cupboard somewhere, they're not going to blossom and meet their full potential, and actually could cause a lot of harm.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think even just, I mean, we're talking about neurodivergence here, but even, every child, my background is in child development and early years education. That's what my degrees were in and my master's was in. And even then, just across the board, every child is individual. Every child needs different types of support within, everyday life and within an educational setting. So we're told about how this kind of unique child, thinking about the EYFS for schools and that, and they have this focus on unique child, and that's why children have key workers, so they can get to know the children that are part of their key working group, and they can tailor the education as best as they can to each individual child. So we know that that every person is different, child, adult, regardless. So it seems like a no-brainer to me to think, well, if children are experiencing, or all adults are experiencing these additional challenges, it would make sense to identify them and be able to, like you say, put in reasonable adjustments and things like that to make, their experience easier and a lot more enjoyable. And then again, we're always told to play on children's strengths and empower them, and give them autonomy and give them these experiences. So yes, we're talking about neurodivergence here, but I think it plays just generally every person is individual, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Pretty much sums up then the neurodiversity paradigm,
Yeah.
which is about all ways of thinking are all equally valuable, and when together, amazing things can happen.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm just going to bring this to a close now. I think that's a really nice sentence to bring into our final question anyway. But because Recap is all about embracing everyone and making everyone feel at home and part of a supportive community, I do ask all guests to have a think of one piece of advice or an empowering message to give to our listeners to just help share that love and support. So if you could say one thing to help even just one person, what is it that you'd like to say?
I would probably say, never let anyone ever tell you that you're not good enough, and that includes yourself.
I think that's a key point as well. That we quite often are our worst critic, aren't we?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. I learned that lesson very hard way, as I mentioned earlier, and actually you can achieve things that you want to achieve, and but we can sometimes hamstring ourselves, and but if you have the idea of something you want to do, go for it, and even if it might seem sometimes really difficult, draw upon your family, get that support. It's okay to take a step back, take a deep breath, and then go back in again, but just keep moving.
Simon, thank you. That is a perfect way to draw this to a close. Thank you so much for coming on today to talk about your expertise in the area of neurodivergence, and also for sharing your story about Bethany as well, and your trip into parenthood with all of your children. It's been really interesting and inspiring listening to your story. So thank you for taking the time and sharing with us today.
And no problem. Thank you very much for having me.
You are very welcome. And I'll pop some links underneath the episode, like I said, and some links to the charities as well, so that everyone can show their support if they wish to.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, and I hope everybody is well.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot, Simon. Speak soon.
Thank you. Bye bye.